Chapter 4. 1. Said the preacher. We were sitting on the couch, and Winn-Dixie was sitting between us. Winn-Dixie had already decided he liked the couch a lot. 1, said the preacher again. Winn-Dixie looked at him kind of hard. Your mama was real funny. She could make just about anybody laugh. 2, he said. She had red hair and freckles. Just like me, I said. Just like you, he nodded. 3, she liked to plant things. She had a talent for it. She could stick a tire in the ground and practically grow a car. Winn-Dixie started chewing on his paw, and I tapped him on the head to make him stop. 4, said the preacher. She could run fast. If you were racing her, you couldn't even let her get a head start, because she would beat you for sure. I'm that way too, I said. Back home in Watley, I raced Liam Fullerton and beat him, and he said it wasn't fair because boys and girls shouldn't race each other to begin with, and I told him he was just a sore loser. The preacher nodded. He was quiet for a minute. I'm ready for number 5, I told him. 5. She couldn't cook. She burned everything, including water. She had a hard time opening up a can of beans. She couldn't make head nor tail out of a piece of meat. 6. The preacher rubbed his nose and looked up at the ceiling. Winn-Dixie looked up too. Number 6 is that your mama loved a story. She would sit and listen to stories all day long. She loved to be told a story. She especially liked the funny ones, stories that made her laugh. The preacher nodded his head like he was agreeing with himself. What's number 7, I asked. Let's see. Oh, she knew all the constellations, every planet and the nighttime skies. Every last one of them, she could name them and point them out. She never got tired of looking up at them. Number 8, said the preacher with his eyes closed, was that she hated being a preacher's wife. She said she couldn't stand having the ladies at church judge her for what she was wearing and what she was cooking and how she was singing. She said it made her feel like she was a big bug under a microscope. When Dixie lay down on the couch, he put his nose in the preacher's lap and his tail in mine. 10, said the preacher. 9, I told him. 9, said the preacher. She drank. She drank beer and whiskey and wine, and sometimes she couldn't stop drinking, and that made me and your mama fight it quite a lot. Number 10, he said with a long sigh. Number 10 is that your mama loved you. She loved you very much. But she left me, I told him. She left us, the preacher said softly, and I could see him pulling into his old turtle head back into his stupid turtle shell. She packed her bags and she left us, and she didn't leave one thing behind. Okay, I said, and I got up off the couch. Winn-Dixie hopped off too. Thank you for telling me, I said. I went back to my room and I wrote down all 10 things that the preacher told me. I wrote them down just the way that he said them to me so that I wouldn't forget them. And then I read them out loud to Winn-Dixie until I had them all memorized. I wanted to know those 10 things inside and out. Even if that way, if my mama ever came back and I could recognize her, I would be able to grab her and hold on to her tight and not let her get away from me again. Chapter 5. Winn-Dixie couldn't stand to be left alone, and we found that out real quick. If me and the preacher went off and left him by himself in the trailer, he pulled all the cushions off the couch and all the toilet paper off the roll. So we started tying him up outside with the rope when we left. That didn't work either. Winn-Dixie howled until Samuel, Miss Detweiler's dog, started howling too. And it was exactly the kind of noise the people at the all-adult trailer park do not like to hear. "He just don't like being left alone," I told the preacher. "That's all. Let's just take him with us." I could understand the way that Winn-Dixie felt. Getting left behind probably made his heart feel empty. After a while, the preacher gave in, and everywhere we went, we took Winn-Dixie, even to church. The Open Arms Baptist Church in Naomi isn't a regular-looking church. The building used to be a Pick It Quick store, and when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the Pick It Quick motto. It's written on the floor in little tiny red tiles that make the great big letters say, "Pick, pick, pick, quick, quick, quick." The preacher tried painting over those tiles, but the letters just won't stay covered up. So the preacher had to just give up and let them be. The other thing about the Open Arms is that it's different from other churches in that there aren't any pews. People bring their own fold-up chairs and lawn chairs, so sometimes it looks more like the congregation is watching a parade or sitting at a barbecue instead of being at church. It's kind of a strange church, and I thought Winn-Dixie would fit right in. But the first time we brought Winn-Dixie to the Open Arms, the preacher tied him outside the front door. "Why did we bring him all the way here just to tie him up?" I asked the preacher. "Because dogs do not belong in church, Opal," the preacher said. "That is why." He tied Winn-Dixie up to a tree and said how there were lots of shade for him and that ought to work out real good. Well, it didn't. The service started and there was some singing and some sharing and some praying, and then the preacher started preaching. And he wasn't but 2 or 3 words into his sermon when there was a terrible howl coming from outside. The preacher tried to ignore it. "Today," he said. "Oh," said Winn-Dixie. "Please," said the preacher. "Oh," said Winn-Dixie back. "Friends," said the preacher. "Oh," wailed Winn-Dixie. Everyone turned in their lawn chairs and fold-up chairs and looked at one another. "Opal," said the preacher. "Oh," said Winn-Dixie. "Yes, sir," I said. "Go get that dog," he yelled. "Yes, sir." I went outside and I untied Winn-Dixie and I brought him inside, and he sat down beside me and he smiled up at the preacher. And the preacher couldn't help it. He smiled back. Winn-Dixie had that effect on him. And so the preacher started in preaching again. And Winn-Dixie sat there listening to it, wiggling his ears this way and that, trying to catch all the words. And everything would have just been all right, except when that mouse ran across the floor. The Open Arms had mice. They were there from when it was a Pick It Quick, and there was lots of good things to eat in the building. And when the Pick and Quick became the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi, the mice stayed around to eat all the leftover crumbs from the potluck suppers. The preacher kept on saying he was going to have to do something about him, but he never did, because the truth is, he couldn't stand the thought of hurting anything, even a mouse. Well, Winn-Dixie saw that mouse, and he was up and after him. One minute, everything was serious, and the preacher was going on. And the next minute, Winn-Dixie looked like a furry bullet, shooting across the building, chasing that mouse. He was barking, and his feet were skidding all over the polished Pick It Quick floor, and people were clapping and hollering and pointing. They went real wild when Winn-Dixie finally caught that mouse. "I've never in my life seen a dog catch a mouse," said Mrs. Nordley. She was sitting right next to me. "He's a special kind of dog," I told her. "I imagine so," she said back. Winn-Dixie stood there right in front of the whole church, wagging his tail and holding that mouse real careful in his mouth, holding on to him tight but not squishing him. "I believe that mutt's got some retriever in him," somebody said behind me. He's a hunting dog. Winn-Dixie took the mouse over to the preacher and dropped him right at his feet. And when the mouse tried to get away, Winn-Dixie put his paw right on the mouse's tail. Then he smiled at the preacher. He showed him all his teeth. The preacher looked down at the mouse. He looked at Winn-Dixie. He looked at me. He rubbed his nose. And then it got real quiet in the picket quick. "Let us pray," the preacher finally said, "for this mouse." And everybody started laughing and clapping. The preacher picked up the mouse by the tail and walked over and threw it out the front door of the picket quick. And everybody applauded again. Then he came back and we all prayed together. I prayed for my mama. I told God how much she would have loved hearing that story of Winn-Dixie catching that mouse. It would have made her laugh. I asked God if maybe I could be the one to tell it to her someday. And then I talked to God about how I was lonely in Naomi because I didn't know any kids, only the ones from church. And there weren't even that many kids at the open arms, just Dunlop and Stevie Dewberry, two brothers who weren't twins, but they looked like they were. And Amanda Wilkinson, whose face was always pinched up like she was smelling something real bad. And Sweetie Pie Thomas, who was only 5 years old and still mostly a baby. And none of them wanted to be my friend anyway, because they probably thought I'd tell on them to the preacher for every little thing they did wrong, and then they would get in trouble with God and their parents. So I told God I was lonely, even having Winn-Dixie. And finally, I prayed for the mouse like the preacher suggested. I prayed that he didn't get hurt. And when he went flying out the window of the Open Arms Baptist Church in Naomi, I prayed that he landed on a nice soft patch of grass.